13 men may now determine the future of American health care. I want to show you their faces. These are the 13 Republican senators who will now take up that House bill that passed this week and craft a Senate version. Not even one woman will be sitting at this table when the key group talks about crucial issues, including childbirth, maternity leave, breast cancer, that are all part of our health care coverage. I want to read you the response one of the senator's aides gave to our Dana Bash, saying, quote, "We have no interest in playing the games of identity politics. That's not what this is about. It's about getting a job done." Let's talk it over with conservative columnist and CNN political commentator Kayleigh McEnany. Also with us, Democratic strategist and former president of Young Democrats of America, Atima Omara. So Kayleigh, to you first, and then to Atima. Is this a glaring omission, no women in this group, that may craft a health care plan that could very well become the law of the land?
Look, no health care bill is going to be passed without the input of women. They need 51 senators. That means that they will have to have women who vote on this. I agree with you in the sense that it would be helpful if you had someone like Senator Susan Collins, who's co-sponsored a piece of legislation, a health care replacement plan. It'd be helpful to have her in the room, at least initially. I think it will make their jobs easier. So this will not be passed without the input of women, but they would help themselves if they had someone else, a woman on there from the get-go.
Atima, how do you explain this? Is it acceptable for them not to have a woman on this group to start with?
Well, it's not acceptable, and the reason why it's not acceptable, and I'll go out and say that I agree with Kayleigh in that this is going to be covering all Americans ideally, and it needs to consider the fact that women have certain health issues that men don't have, such as we have monthly menstrual cycles, we are more likely to suffer from sexual assault, domestic violence, all things that come through health care coverage for care, as well as maternity, if you're considering having children or not, or even in vitro fertilization if you are having trouble having children. So those are conversations that definitely need to be brought to the table and, are usually expected and affected by women the most. And yeah, that's what I would say is an oversight, and it's a bad oversight indeed.
Now, some GOP House members who voted yes are already hearing from some pretty unhappy constituents. I want you all to listen to what Idaho Congressman Raul Labrador had to say at a town hall after the vote.
You are mandating people on Medicaid except dying. You are making a mandate.
No one wants anybody to die. That line is so indefensible. Nobody dies because they don't have access to health care.
You hear the reaction that his response got. Kayleigh, was his response appropriate, do you think?
Look, I don't think it was the best way to answer that question, and I think Republicans need to be very much on message. You have to sell this to the American people. That's one thing President Obama did well, is he sold Obamacare to the American people. It took a year and a half. Many would argue it took many more years. Now that system is failing. 1/3 of U.S. counties only have one insurer. We know premiums are going up by 25% this year on average, but he was good at messaging it to the American people, and Republicans need to get their messaging together, because that's the only way something like the AHCA will be accepted by the people.
Atima, that is true that there are a lot of counties now in America that have only one insurer that is participating in these Obamacare exchanges, or are even threatening to leaving some people with no options at all. How do you address that?
Well, specifically, going back to the dark days before any sort of health care coverage, where folks had to, if you had pre-existing conditions, you'd have to pay 5 times more. If you could even get insurance coverage, is not an option. Under the current bill that they passed in the House, having Trump care, if you're an old person between the ages of 50 to 64, you're not going to be able to, you're going to be paying 5 times more than you are now. So addressing health care coverage specifically so they can make sure everybody can have it is what should be the conversation here, and keeping those costs down. The current option reduces coverage, increases costs, and guts protections for those with pre-existing conditions.
Let's talk about pre-existing conditions. I want to show you a list that we have. It's creating uncertainty, obviously, for a lot of people under this House GOP plan if states opt for the waivers. These conditions include asthma, high cholesterol, diabetes. I mean, these are conditions affecting millions of Americans. So, Kayleigh, how do lawmakers deal with this effectively? Couldn't this be a huge risk for Republicans to put their neck out there if cost of coverage for people with any of these pre-existing conditions goes up?
Right. Well, it's incumbent upon Republicans, and in particular Secretary Price that he only grants states waivers out of the Obamacare pre-existing protections if they have a working system. And the law, as I just want to read you a line from it. It says that a waiver will only be given to a state if they have stabilized premiums for individuals with pre-existing conditions. So in theory, the law protects these people. Now, in practice, we know that's a different story. And that's why I say Republicans, if they want states to take over protecting these people, it is incumbent upon them to ensure they're only given waivers if these individuals are adequately protected. And I would just quickly point out, under Obamacare, you look at a state like Iowa where their last individual market insurance company is exiting the market. Someone with pre-existing conditions who's in the individual market, they might not have any coverage at all.
But, I mean, we've got the AARP, the American Medical Association. These are some of the groups that say that this GOP bill might hurt more than it helps, that people with pre-existing conditions, low-income Americans, older Americans, all stand to lose, Kayleigh. How can you guarantee that that is not going to happen?
Well, right now, no one really knows what's going to happen because it's a provision in the law that says we're going to go on a case-by-case basis with states. So it could go one way, where if a state like Maine, for instance, they have a great high-risk pool system, people with pre-existing conditions.
It could go that way, but is there a guarantee?
There's not a guarantee, and that's why I say Republicans, if they want to pass this, I prefer the Obama-era provision just as someone who has a pre-existing condition myself, but if Republicans want to go down this road, they have to tread carefully, because if they don't, there will be a new, if you like your doctor, you can keep it, lie from the Obama administration, except this time it will be a Republican lie on pre-existing conditions.
I'll give you the last word, Atima.
I would just simply say that the Trump care in its iteration right now is not something that's going to be beneficial for most Americans. It's going to kick more people off the coverage. It's not going to take care of people with pre-existing conditions. It's not going to help older Americans. We need a bill that is going to make sure that every American is covered. And ironically enough, this is a bill that will affect specifically people who voted for Trump, because expanded Medicaid coverage has happened in places like Kentucky, like Louisiana, which are states that were a lot of Trump voters. So it's in the best interest of the GOP and particularly President Trump that we have a bill that makes sure we cover those people who specifically have come to rely on the benefits that healthcare has provided.
All right, Atima O'Mara and Kayleigh McEnany, our thanks to both of you. Coming up, free at last.